Hi, Johnny Mnemonic here. It's been a while and we see each other on this next tutorial. It's gonna be about compositing workflow for 3D visual effects. Now, this is not what you expect from a Transformers movie, but I explain, the whole workflow and some ideas of compositing and trying to do, seamless compositing along with matching, the shadows of a scene, and hopefully you're gonna learn something. So, and we're gonna be doing this multipass, to have a separate reflection and shadow passes, which will help us, in further compositing, and control. So first part of compositing and 3D workflow is tracking the camera and exporting it into a 3D program. Now you may track it in After Effects using track camera feature, and then export it through script into 3D Max or Maya. But you will have a scene file in the download, so you don't need to do that. It's not about tracking, it's more about compositing this tutorial. But I'll show you how I did that. First, you need to export a JPEG sequence from After Effects from your footage, which you do like this, JPEG sequence resize to 1280. That's what I did, and export it into a directory. Now, and then I used Visual for tracking this, which may not be an option for you, but like I said, you have the scene file included. So the way I did this is importing the sequence, apply, then you have to edit camera to 25 frames per second, which is native FPS rate, which this was shot with. Then I created a poly mask and masked out the background, so I was tracking only the floor. Invert, then animate the mask, track features, solve camera, and then you add a test object. Hey, it's looking okay. Now Visual has a lot of catches, especially with the geometry, because what 3D spits out is this, which may seem like a bullshit, because you should have these points on the ground. Now the way you solve these is by either moving the whole coordinate system and then or doing geometry. I'm not gonna be going into that, it's a little bit too tricky. But then when you are satisfied, like you have to do it like 20-50 times sometimes, it's kind of funny. You export a Max script or file for After Effects if you're gonna be using Element 3D, and save it. Then let's jump into 3D Max and get this thing going a little quicker. So I got the model already in place, which doesn't really matter, but you take the Max script file, slam it in, and there you go, you have a camera there. And let's start matching the scene and tweaking it and doing all the good stuff. So first Alt B Now use files for viewport background. It should natively pop up here because Max recognizes it, because information about the sequence file is embedded in this Max script file. Now if the Max script doesn't work, you may want to go into that, since the paths here are to my computer. So the solution is just take this section and force remove it. Now we got a viewport background, now we got our Buddha in place, and now we need to recreate the environment a little bit. Now the correct solution would be having HDRI from this this space, which means left side, right side, you know, to have a correct reflection and stuff. But when you realize that in effects or 3D animation, it has to just look okay. It doesn't have to be precise, but as soon as it's looking okay and seamless, hey, it's fine, because that will create your for you incredible headache, like being precise and Nazi about it. Of course it's okay, but if you're not in a feature film, like, and you do some visual effects for yourself, then it's really not worth it. And when you realize, like, this shot has 4 seconds, there is virtually no chance for spectator to, like, figure it out or tell you, hey, you didn't use correct HDRI or stuff like that. So think about it. It has to just look like it was there. It doesn't have to be there, like, physically. Okay. Now, since if we render this right now with one basic light I put there, it will spit out something like this. I got this somewhere here, the testing version, test Buddha. So this was a test for me to figure out if the tracking sticks in place, but you can see some obvious problems, you know, like, hey, lighting is way off. It's there is no indirect illumination, and yeah, it's it doesn't look realistic. It just looks like someone stick shit over that footage. So okay, so way you recreate this more seamless and a little bit more pleasant looking effect is by recreating the indirect illumination of the scene. Once you realize that, okay, there are multiple lights here, of course the correct way would be going into 3D and recreate each one of these spotlights, and so on and so on. But like I said, that the goal here is to create this fast, you know, and if you don't have time like to mess with it like for 2 weeks, then of course, and if you create all the lights like as a light array, the render time would be like humongous. Okay, so again, like, if you try to make it like kind of right with just one light, good for you, and it's better. Now you need to understand that I'm just trying to explain the principle. I'm not saying this is the correct way. Of course, we all know what is the correct way. Correct way is to have a equirectangular HDRI of this environment and stuff like that. Now, of course, if I did this Buddha from bronze or silver, then of course when you add silver Buddha and you don't have reflections, okay, like reflection of this sweater here, reflection of these pictures here, then it's gonna not work, you know. So that's why I picked marble Buddha, because hey, it's not reflective, so I'm not giving myself out so much. Okay, so first we need to create indirect illumination of the Buddha, because light bounces from the floor up in here, from this wall up in here, and that creates like this soft looking image. Of course this Buddha is further color corrected with a curves adjustment. Of course you can really play around with it. This may look even a little better. Yeah, and I think I like this even more. Now I did this Buddha like this on purpose, with a little more dramatic shadows. I tried a version with a light array as well, and it didn't look half as good as this one. Again, it just has to seem like it was there, not, you know, precisely. Okay, so it left me a space to further color correct this and stuff like that. So first things first, let's just jump ahead and recreate the environment. I start up with a plane, make it large enough, and recreate the floor to be corresponding. Align this here like that, and I created, first I have to switch to mental array render. We're gonna be using scanline shadow pass, but we're gonna do this a little later on. Okay, so I created all my materials beforehand, but let's do it again. So way I did the floor was Arcan Design, bitmap, and I recreated the environment with a texture which looks like that. Again, you know, it's just to have a idea of it. It's of course it's gonna be only in the reflections, okay? It's just there to make the indirect illumination as realistic as possible without breaking a sweat. So I just put the texture in there and slam it here, display it in viewport. Then I put a UV map on the plane, and just make it like it is in okay, so this white stripe should be here. So I take a gizmo of the UV map, align it, just, you know, just so it's kinda there. Then drag it on y-axis a little closer, and yeah, we got like it's kinda okay. This is gonna be our floor, and since I recreated the floor in the shot with textures like as closely as possible, it's gonna also, you know, it will act kinda realistically. So that's the floor. Now we just recreate again. The only reason I'm doing this is to have a indirect illumination kinda okay. Like I said, you know, in order to create this quickly. Okay, white wall again. If I wanted to have a precise representation, I would have to recreate the pictures as well. But I hope you get the idea. It's just about the idea. Again, the wall is white, and I need a bounce light from here to the Buddha's back and bounce light from this floor up in here. Okay, so that's for the walls. And again, since I'm not doing reflective Buddha because I don't have resources or I don't have the scene perfectly recreated, I'm gonna have to use something that will not give myself away. Now I just recreate the box that is here rather quickly again, and I also recreated the texture of the box. Easy way, I just took it and cut it out and made a little texture out of it, you know. Again, just to have like the brief representation of it. Again, arc and design, material, use bitmap as a texture and slam it in there. Put it on the box, and there we go. So that's it for the environment. Like, this is kind of enough. And then we just create a Buddha texture. I already have this arc and design marble texture. Again, arc and design, use bitmap as a texture, set reflectivity to 0.3, glossiness to 0.6 or 0.4 or 5, 0.45 might work well. Put it on the Buddha, UV map your model, of course. Same principle, you can adjust it with a gizmo or you can use box mapping, whatever. I used Planner for my example, it worked just fine, you know. So now we got the basic scene set up, and then now we need to recreate the light. Now again, very quick and easy way, I used mental array sky portal somewhere here, just based on experience or whatever. Drag it over, and now if we didn't have indirect illumination or final gather, it will look like this. Shadows will be thick and dark, but since we recreated the basic scene setup, we're gonna have bounce light from this box up onto the belly, from the wall, and so on and so on. So let's hit F9, test what we've done. Oh, and Buddha is missing. It's a mystery, but hey, I know how to fix it. Okay, so now let's check what we got. Yeah, it's not a disaster, but hey, it is a disaster actually. So we try to make the light smaller. Of course, don't forget to tick custom in mental array sky portal. The reason I'm using this light is that it doesn't give you those huge specular highlights, since the lighting in the room is kind of flat. Okay, this is looking a little better now. We may want to try to achieve a little thicker shadows here. Try to make it even smaller, which obviously will give me less light, and then I can color correct it in compositing. Okay, and then just think about it. Imagine, okay, so if I crank it up in post-production, what will happen? Okay, if I crank this up, belly would blow out a little bit, and yeah, and this may look kind of okay, So I save the image, and this is what you're gonna have to do to, you know, do tests, a lot of them, like go back and forth, get back and forth until you're satisfied. Now, way I do it, I just do it based on my feeling, you know. There's no mathematics involved, it's just how I feel about it. So I saved this test render. Okay, I forgot something. First I need to take these objects, untick visible to camera, because I want them only to be visible in reflections and refractions, these two, and then I will have an alpha channel pass. Now don't worry about the shadows right now. We're not gonna be using shadows. Again, I may try to use, which I did for the first time, I used the scene as a environment map, but it didn't look okay. Like, again, because you use environment map doesn't mean it will look like it was there. Like I said, it's just the way you feel about it, really. So try different settings. Now I try to turn the environment on, and since the Buddha is not very reflective, it doesn't, like, it didn't do a lot, of course. So I'm not gonna be using that because it will make up for quicker render. Okay, so I got this basic render, and okay, so and let's check how it does it look like. Have your After Effects opened, because you're gonna be doing a lot of back and forth game. Okay, I open up new composition, and I drag the test. Okay, I delete this, it's annoying. I import it and see how it looks like. Okay, of course, yeah, it's looking pretty good actually. It has this bounce light from here to here, and the color is also very similar. That's another point, you know, why we did this, because of the color. Because you have to realize that bounce light from the floor will also carry information about the color, and it will bounce again on the Buddha. Okay, now we can test what will it do with the curves adjustment. Maybe crank it up and do it with a little more contrast. Yeah. Okay, so let's assume we are satisfied with this. It's not a complete disaster actually. I think it's looking okay, based on a feeling again. And okay, so now when you're satisfied with the way your Buddha is looking, and after you tested how color correction or curves adjustment, you know, if it can save it or improve it in post-production, so then render this out. Again, check not to have all the other stuff here visible to camera, and the sampling, new max 14 sampling. It's actually pretty good. So boost down the quality to 0.5, maybe 0.75 is also okay. Use 2 or 3 minimum samples. I used Mitchell filter for it, and the rest is okay. Global illumination, just hit 3 diffuse bounces. That means the light will bounce 3 times before it dissipates. Keep this. You don't have to crank your indirect illumination a lot when you're doing these alpha channel renders, okay? Then choose a path and render this out and call it Buddha Pass. And it's gonna go pretty quick. So after you rendered your Buddha Pass out, import it into your composition, and this is what you're gonna have. It should stick there, of course it will, because you got the tracking file. And now you can now we can further improve our compositing skills and hoping for seamless composition, okay? So of course it doesn't look really natural. We need a reflection pass, which is, as you can see here, there is a little reflection. Now always when you're trying to composite visual effects, study the scene, look at it, like, and think. Look at the picture and think about it, you know, like notice how shadow looks like and stuff like that. There is no mathematical formula. That's why it's called still an art, because it's up to you. It's based a lot on how you feel. So look at the image, look at the shadows. We can see shadows are very light. It's just basically just a smear underneath the object. So that's what we try to recreate as well, again visually. Like, I see this shadow and I try to make this one similar. But first we're gonna do reflection pass on the floor, which is this one. As you can notice, there is a reflection and it is fading, and it's done natively in 3D Max, because that's probably what would happen, although we can see a lot of reflection of this box, but it's fading up until here. It's just a smear, and the only reason we see so much of it is because it's shiny. Okay, so the light bounces back on the floor to it. So I think for our purpose, for our Buddha, this little like fading reflection, short one, it's gonna be just enough. And how I did that. Okay, so let's jump back into our scene, which which I hope you have opened, and let's go ahead and create a reflection pass. Now, since we already rendered Buddha, we won't be needing this plane again. So, and again, like, do one step at a time, because once you move to the next step, you can't go back. Like, for me, I did this like 1,000 times, so I don't really save this, because once you finished with one step, hey, there's no turning back. But if you want to make adjustments later on, save this pass as a base or base pass or Buddha pass, and after you make adjustments, resave this as a reflection pass. Let me show what I mean. Go ahead and find matte shadow material, matte shadow reflection for mental ray, slam it onto the plane, and now we're just gonna be doing reflections. And since the reflection pass or the matte shadow material is gonna be, the shadow is gonna be cast also from this box, we just first have to disable cast shadows for these objects here, or we can even delete them, okay, because we won't be needing them anymore since the base Buddha pass is done. Now save this as a reflection pass, so you get separate file for every of your passes, okay? I'm not gonna be doing that, but save it as a reflection pass, because now we're just gonna be working reflection in this step. So remove all this shit here, disable shadow casting for the mental ray light, which I hope you forgot to tell you, but when you're rendering this Buddha pass, just disable shadows, okay, on the mental ray light, because we'll be doing them in separate pass. Okay, so with light still on, shadows disabled, we need to set up our reflection plane. So disable shadows on this matte shadow reflection material, disable ambient occlusion, disable receive indirect illumination. And the reason for that, it's just this shadow is just so subtle that again it's all about speed and time saving. And then just hit reflections, and now max distance. This is the variable that will, you know, how to explain that. This is basically the fading of the reflection, okay? If you have it set on 0, it's gonna be all of the Buddha will be visible. So what I did, we can set something like 30 centimeters, and it means after 30 centimeters it's gonna get faded. So next thing is, we don't want to be rendering Buddha now, so untick visible to camera, but visible to everything else. And let's check on the alpha channel what we have. Yeah, we don't have anything. Okay, so that was the problem. You have to delete the original plane and do it just once again, one more plane object. So we have the reflection now here. As you can see, it's fading. I'll show you what I meant. If I set it to 0, as you can see, all of the Buddha is going to be reflected. So the bigger the max distance, okay, 50, this may look even better. So let's agree on like 40 centimeters, and that's pretty good. Now I can disable again. When you're satisfied, of course, make sure you switch back to camera 1, and when you're satisfied with your reflection, just render it out. And the way I do this really quickly is disable final gather for this. You don't be needing that, and like I said, it's a quick way of doing stuff. Also, the render, you can push down the quality of this a little bit because it's just so subtle, and the way you can increase your effectiveness even more is just put the region render, because this is the only thing we need, is this stripe of the shadow. Now you can't keyframe this, so you have to set it in a way that's gonna you know, capture all this area for the whole duration. So hey, this is okay. Now again, save this as a reflection pass, render it out, and you're good to go to the last step, okay, which is the shadows. Now soft shadows in mental ray are kind of tricky because they render really slow. So the way we can help ourselves is just creating area shadows in scanline, okay? So for the last pass, which is the shadow pass, we're gonna switch to, again, once you finished with the reflection pass, save it, and as you move to the next step, resave your project as the last pass, like shadow pass, okay? So you can go back anytime you need, like, and feel you need to create adjustments. Now switch to the scan line, put a standard material on a Buddha, remove the sky portal light, and go to the materials and invoke matte shadow material, put it on a plane, or yeah, maybe even redo the plane once again with a fresh new one, matte shadow material. And now we just create an area shadows which are incredibly fast to render, and they are soft and realistic, and they lose energy. Okay, so put the light in, and now the shadows here, if you look at them, they are kind of really subtle. Now what I did was not necessarily realistic, but I thought it's looking good. Yeah, this smear is like a little longer. Okay, of course you can always, if you think, hey, that's way out of line, you can just take this area on the shadow pass with the shadow pass highlighted and just mask it out, you know, with a subtraction mask, and feather it, and you get rid of this smear, and hey, you got this shadow a little more realistic, like just underneath the Buddha. But we're gonna be compositing this further on, later on. So area shadows, how to set them up. First, align them the way you want them to be cast. Then check again properties, invisible to camera. This is a matte shadow plane, and then you just set the area shadows on, area shadows properties. Set the integrity to 4, quality to something like 6, sample spread bias, that's all good. Now area light dimensions, this is the key. The bigger the area light dimensions are, the softer and the more like a blobby the shadow's gonna look like. So if I hit F9, okay, so now we got pretty hard shadow, which is, it's maybe even okay. It really depends on your vision, and not about being Nazi about something. So I try to make the area light a little bigger, which could give me softer shadow. Okay, so this is looking okay, but you have to first, before you render it out, check how does it look like. Okay, so shadow 2, save it as a PNG on frame 1, that's okay. So now in this new composition we can check how the shadow is gonna look like. Yeah, it's a little too hard, a little too much on that side, so we're gonna shift this light a little more overhead and make the area light dimensions even bigger, 55 by 55, and check what we got. Okay, like I said, I like this smear on the left side. Let's try something like this. Switch to camera 1. Okay, so this is kind of okay, I like it. Again, since we will have the separate shadow pass, now we can play with the opacity, and we can even mask something out, you know. So that's the idea. Okay, so render your shadow pass with scanline. It's gonna take half a second for one frame, and you're good to go. Save your work, and see you in After Effects. Okay, so here we are. I open up clean After Effects instance, and yeah, let's go ahead and composite our Buddha shot. So first we're gonna import the footage. Now this is the scale down sequence, JPEG sequence. It's okay. Now we're gonna import our renders. So first the base pass for Buddha, put it in. Next, reflection pass, and next shadow pass. And hey, we are basically done. But now it's the compositing time. Now it's time to tweak it and make it look a little better. Now, as you can see, my original render came out pretty dark. I should have maybe did it natively in 3D Max a little lighter, but since I knew fixing this in post-production is gonna be quite easy, I just, you know, like, took it because, hey, like I said, this tutorial is just about the idea and concept, you know. It's always your job to make things look perfect. Okay, so now base Buddha pass. Okay, we're gonna have to really like lighten it up because it was really too dark. Maybe add a little bit of contrast, and a little like this. Maybe the shadows are still a little thick. Maybe crush it a little bit, decrease contrast. So something like this. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this. It's looking cool, kind of cool. Okay, put reflection pass underneath the shadow, and let's work the shadow a little bit. Now obviously it's too thick, so we push the opacity a little down, and the smear, I still like the smear, but hey, if you don't, mask it out with a subtraction mask right here. So, but it still doesn't look that it's kinda there, so we're gonna have to do something about the edges. There is a neat little effect in After Effects called remove color matting. Okay, now just click the color and try to make the edge disappear by dragging. Now, hey, this is great. Now, next thing is gonna be we may blur this Buddha a little bit, just like 0.3. Yeah, okay, that's looking a lot better. Now repeat edge pixels. Now what else can we do to this? I'm thinking. Yeah, we may trash it. That's what we can do to it. Yeah, okay, just kidding. We have to color correct this overall. So once you add color correction, that applies on the background as well as on the foreground or your 3D render. It's gonna make a huge difference. So I add a little bit of curves onto everything. Put a little bit of, maybe punch up the blue a little bit. Now it's gonna have this tint, and the important thing is it's gonna get like everything gets tinted, like as well as the background, which kind of melts this whole image a little more together. Okay, so that's how you do it. Then maybe adjust even more. Okay, so, and that's it, you know. It's like playing with it, going back and forth until you're satisfied, or your art director or your employer, or you can always go grab a knife and kill the art director and then just scream wildly. One more trick I often do, since renders from 3D often come out a lot with a lot more quality. There is a trick to degrade them by stylize mosaic and put it like 1300 to 1300, and it will pixelate your 3D element, which again helps melting it into the picture. So hey, I hope that's all, and that's it, and see you next time.